Good evening, everyone. We are the Dream Team. My name is Kevin Mitra.
I'm Andrew Brightfeld.
I'm Zach Butcher.
And I'm Lisa Main.
And tonight we'll be doing our presentation on the test that we had done on our mobile banking interface.
So, as Kevin said, our topic was the mobile banking application. Some of the goals that we had going into this project were to create an intuitive interface. After all, there are so many different options on the market right now that if we don't have an intuitive interface, something that's easy for new users to pick up and get used to and get comfortable with, then our application really won't be useful. It won't be successful. The other aspect of an intuitive interface, one of the key components is actually a simple design. So you don't want to over-clutter the layouts, especially on a mobile application because it's so small. Because then you end up with a lot of people fat-fingering things. They're hitting buttons they don't intend to hit. So we really wanted to focus on a simple idea, keep it clean, or even the engineering principle, keep it simple, stupid. The next thing is the common functionality. So all banking applications have certain minimum functionality. Others have a little extra, and that's what sets them apart. But there's a few common features that everyone has that we needed to incorporate as well, which include logging in, of course, but making payments and making transfers between accounts. And then finally, success would be measured, at least for us, in terms of whether or not a user, after going through the test with a paper prototype, whether or not it's something that they could see themselves using in real life. So that was one of the key questions that we asked was, is this something you would use or you would refer a friend to use?
We chose the mobile banking interface for multiple reasons. Most importantly, to capitalize on the vast growing user base and exhibit a simple, renowned application that anybody can use efficiently. From this, we wanted to deviate from the design flaws that current applications and bank establishments were inhibiting. An example of this would be not showing your balance while you're going through making transfers and payments. You have to go back rather than just having it displayed there naturally. Also, we wanted to incorporate critical design principles for ease of use following the CRAP acronym. Our user demographics were based off data-driven research and shown that the wide use among age groups was between 18 to 29 and 30 to 44. As the graph on the right shows, since from 2011 onward, the percentages have gone up for both smartphone users and those using mobile banking applications. Our users are motivated by convenience, and this demographic expects a reliable, secure, feature-rich mobile banking application, with the most important aspect of removing the need to physically visit the bank. The higher rate of prevalence in users adopting mobile banking applications also suggests that as smartphone adoption increases, the trend of mobile banking will increase as well.
So in order to figure out whether or not our design was good, we developed a test plan. So the first thing that we did was, before every test, we introduced the user to the test. We explained what we wanted them to do, and we kind of got them comfortable. We wanted to make sure that they weren't being influenced by any kind of outside factors or stress. Unfortunately, one user did get a little nervous. He seemed a little stressed out, but everyone else we were able to kind of acclimate to the test environment. Along with that, part of the acclimation is to make sure that we were controlling as much as possible. So we wanted to make sure that we did it in a closed environment. We had the doors closed. We were the only ones in the room at the time. That way we could control as many variables as possible. Then once we started the test, we ourselves, as observers, made sure we kept track of as much information as we could. So we kept track of time, the number of errors that were made, any reactions or thoughts of the user while they were participating. So we actually had them speak out loud. We wanted to hear what they had to say, what they were thinking during the test. That way we could get some actual insight as to kind of that subconscious almost input that they would have. And then finally, when they were finally done with the test, we got verbal feedback from them. We also got written feedback and then a grading rubric. And the purpose behind each of these different types was to get different areas of information or different pieces of information back from them. And then we used the numeric grading rubric to determine what our strong points were and what our flaws were with our overall design.
All right, so thank you, Zach. Kind of going into what he was saying, we used this survey at the end that as a scorecard for our application, and this was based on really three main metrics, one on design, or three main measures, one on design, usability, and information and presentation on the application. And it's kind of blurry. We'll send a copy of the presentation so you'll be able to review this. But we found that in our application, we actually scored pretty highly on all three metrics, about in the 95% range on most. But there's still always areas for improvement. And one of the things that the users had noted was our color choice was a bit distracting, according to them, but I digress. I think it's awesome. And the other thing too was multiple methods for navigation, but that was pretty intentional to keep the application simple and just have one really main navigation panel, which we'll see in the next slide. So again, kind of referring to what I was saying before, we kept the design pretty simple with one main use of navigation with this lower navigation panel. So we found our application to be pretty successful. All of the users completely navigated the application and successfully completed all the tasks that we had assigned. And we attribute this to an easy and simplistic design along with these design principles that we had applied. Kind of going along, we have clear primary actions, which goes hand in hand with taking away user choice, where we grade out all the input that we ask a user to do until all the information is filled in. Showing only what's needed, we hide all the other functionalities of the application under this More button, apart from the two primary actions that we have. Also navigation hints, adding in these three little dots, hinting at that there's probably other functionalities hidden under this. And we also applied the crap principle, adding in contrast to show where the user is on the bottom navigation panel by adding in a lighter shade of green. Adding in repetition, so all screens really have the same design of like the bottom navigation panel, the main functionality of the page, and then log off button up top. Alignment, keeping everything centered, and then proximity, having that same idea of where things are in the application, bottom navigation, main functionality, and top in log off.
Okay, failures. Some of the failures we found was that there was not enough contrast between the three bottom buttons. So the users were confused about where they actually were in the application. And another area of failure was that users were trying to input text or other kind of input into areas that were non-input areas, like the checking and savings area that we mainly use just as a display to display the account balances. Part of this may have been due to the fact that there are many commercial applications that use these areas for the user to put input into, and the other failure was due to the fact that this is a paper prototype, so there was no haptic feedback, or when they touch it, it vibrates or it doesn't vibrate. In our case, it wouldn't vibrate to show them that they couldn't actually put anything in there. Another area of failure for a couple people were the ambiguous header more. They weren't aware that they needed to go into the more, press the more to get into the payments function. Most people just, since they didn't see a payment button, and they just assumed that this is where they would make the payment, so they made the correct choice. Some of the surprises were between what we called experienced users and inexperienced users. We asked the users on the questionnaire whether they had ever used a mobile banking app. A couple of users said they hadn't, so we considered them inexperienced, and the majority of them had, so they were the experienced users. We found that the inexperienced users navigated the interface quicker. They performed the transferring task and the making a payment task quicker than the experienced users, and they did not commit any errors. The expert users, on the other hand, as it shows, overall, this is a total time, took about 20 seconds more to complete the entire sequence of tasks, and they committed more errors. We believe part of this has to do with the inexperienced users had never used a mobile banking app, so they did not have any preconceived ideas or things that they thought this should be here, or my bank does it like this. So then they're looking for those features, or they're expecting our application to react the same way or to interact with it the same way as theirs. That was part of it. The other part was that the experienced users also had, because they had performed this task before, they kind of didn't read through what was on the screen thoroughly. Inexperienced users, like anyone else, when you're doing something for the first time, you're very careful about how you're doing it. You make sure you're reading everything, getting yourself orientated. So they did that, and they came out with no errors. They didn't just brush over what was there. They made sure they knew where everything was, and said it didn't make any assumptions. So that's why they did better overall.
All right, thank you, Lisa. So in conclusion, we came up with a redesign for our application, and I know it's really hard to see, but again, we'll send a copy of the presentation. But 3 things that we had changed, or there's really 2 main things that we had changed. One, we made a clearer distinction in the contrast of the buttons to show where they are in the application. In the new design, it's a lighter shade of green, and where they on the other buttons are a sort of a slightly darker shade of green. The other thing too is we made a more distinct header for the More button. So instead of a More button, we changed it into a menu, which we believe will be a little bit more intuitive. I mean, if there's only 2 other buttons on the screen, the third being a menu, you probably find all your other functionalities in the menu. Which I guess again encourages less thinking, so it's more straightforward and more user friendly. But this concludes our presentation. I hope you found it insightful, and thank you very much.